Good morning, buenos dias. Thank you so much for joining us, the Latin American Caribbean Committee of the Loreto Communities Immigration Spotlight. We're thrilled to have you join us, and we're even more thrilled to have some fabulous speakers today. We are the Latin America Caribbean Committee, the LACC, founded in 1985. And we exist to be a healing presence, a source of hope, and a force for change while seeking justice and peace for all who are impacted by the inhumane immigration policies and the decades-long interventionist foreign policy of the US throughout the region. So we are very happy to have you join us. We usually start with a reflection or a prayer, and our wonderful LACC member.
So here comes Maureen. She's coming right now.
Okay, so our wonderful LACC member, Maureen Flanagan, will provide that. So we're happy to have Maureen here. Welcome, Maureen. I'm going to pass over to you for our opening reflection and prayer.
Morning.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, I'm just going to do a brief reading from the newspaper, actually. An 8-year-old girl named Anadith Dene Reyes Alvarez from Panama, known to her family as Anna, died in border custody on May 17th. On May 10th, Angel Eduardo Espinoza, 17-year-old Honduran boy, died while he was in a Florida shelter. At least 5 children died in custody after being detained by federal immigration at the border in 2019. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me." Presente.
Presente.
Presente. Thank you so
Gracias.
much, Maureen. We would like to ask if you have not identified yourself in your Zoom ID, if it says something other than your name, if you can please provide your name. We see events at the Loreto Mother House, so I think that people at the Mother House are viewing, and we're happy for that. We just want to make sure that we can take note of all those who have participated today. So if you do not have your name, please, you can change it by going to participants and then clicking the 3 dots. So thank you again for being here. Our immigration spotlights, we strive for 1 hour and 1 hour only. And for today's program, we have 3 wonderful speakers. Let me just say who they are. We have Marta Benavides, who will kick us off. Now, Marta is a dear friend of mine for a long time. I will put some bio facts in the chat, but you know, I don't want to take up more time by doing her introductions, but I do want to say that Marta is with us and presenting this information at, you know, risking a lot for herself and for those that she's connected to, associated with, both internally and externally in country and beyond. So we will let her give any introductory remarks, bio remarks on herself, but we thank her for being here today. And I don't want to say much more because she will fill in, but I know that she is doing this from her heart, and we thank you for that. We will also have Dora Rodriguez, who is the founder of Salvavision and Casa de la Esperanza, and we have Paulina Olvera Cañez from Director of the Espacio Migrante in Tijuana. I'll give more details about them as we progress. But now I would like to give the floor to Marta. And we ask if you can keep yourselves muted. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll take them up as we go along or after Marta's talk. So Marta, you have the floor. Thank you. Gracias.
Rosa, this is about 10 minutes or how long do we have? So that I can keep track of it.
You have about 15 minutes and then
Okay.
we have, we can divide up the time about that time.
Okay.
That-
Buenos dias. This is good that we are having this conversation, even though I know that some people are already on vacation. But it's applicable to what we have to do because it's memorial. A memorial is something to keep the memory and make connections why things happen. And I see that this is an important time, and many of us, or I think that most of the people that are in this conversation today have been in one way or another for a long, long time, giving, going in the directions that we have to be in accompaniment, we call it. So I am going to talk about accompaniment and solidariousness instead of insolidarity, because the times that we are living to get now demand that we go deeper into what we understand that we are here on earth at this time. I cannot say many times, and today is one of those days also, all the aspects that people might want to hear. So I have given Rosa some links for basic information related to the discussion that we are going to have today. And that is because we are going to talk, amongst other things, about the situation of El Salvador and how it's related, for example, to migrants and migrations and the conditions that people are going through in the world today. I come from this tiny country that is called El Salvador, but that's going right now. It has always been since 500 years ago through a lot of problems, because first thing that happened, and that doesn't mean that during our history we didn't suffer any kinds of similar things one way or another, but in recent history, which is still 500 years ago, when the colonizers gave the name of El Salvador to my country, and which original name, ancestral name is Cuscatan, that means land of riches. We as indigenous peoples there didn't consider riches having a lot of gold and things, but we were rich and living in plenitude in a sense because we were never hungry, and we had water, we had good air, we were able to live in contentment. We say, in peace, in general, with ourselves and with nations around us. After the colonizers came, the first thing that happened to us is that we went through the conquest that, just think of the word conquest. That was a very, very forceful thing. And then all the nation became slaves. And we come from that kind of condition. I'm saying that because many times, we see, like say, migrants and the people who are in migrations as very vulnerable people. No, I want to correct that. We are not vulnerable, but we are put in conditions of vulnerability. First, people are forced into being vulnerable so that they become vulnerable, and then we have the kind of situation today that nations are talk without taking that into consideration, and then not only it's not only the situation of what we are living right now, but into the future. We see we start with the conditions now without going into why we are going through those conditions. So, for example, in my country, through the colonizing process, instead of growing the food that we needed, all the land was taken from us by force. And so, like now, we are one of the countries that is most impoverished in the continent, which is Latin America and the Caribbean, and we are also suffering hunger. And so and one of the, well, after Haiti, El Salvador is the country that is more ecologically devastated. We suffer, as Haiti and many nations around the world, deforestation. And so nations want to help us now to reforest, but we cannot reforest really because the land is not ours. And, and then we have to be very, very creative at figuring out how to correct that so that the people that want to help us to reforest, will have to also push for women, rural women, indigenous peoples, older people, youth, all the people that don't have access to jobs, and through reforestation they will have a job. And so, like, to correct the injustices that we are facing right now, and the injustice of the deforestation that is allowing a lot of problems in our countries, to correct it with the donors. So I'm just saying, let's really figure out what's really going on. And so things cannot be corrected by not going to the root of the problems. And so right now, for example, things are getting worse in my country, and the migrations, we had a lot of migrations. Up to recent days, we have had about 500 people per day running out of the country because the violence, but the violence have to do very much with violations, violations to the rights of people and to the rights of the environment, because most of the people in my country, even the ones that are in the rural areas, the rivers are drying, and so they don't have water, and the water that we have is contaminated. So when I want to call the attention that things don't happen out of nothing, that this didn't fall from heaven. These are conditions that are created as we daily live our lives. And so to live democracy, for example, we cannot have a real democracy that is supposed to be the well-being of everybody. And for the well-being of everybody, we have to make sure that our common home, which is not our own country, but the whole planet, is well. And so if we don't have that as the basis for democracy, the only thing that is really, in a sense, is ironic, but the only thing that everybody shares in my country is poverty and, oppression and repression that we have had for years and years. And so, and then, like, we have to have elections that should be democratic. But then, we have this system of parties. Those parties, in order to exist, they exist in an unequal, world. The world is what we create. The planet is, precedes all of us. We belong to the planet, but that, like, we have to see that the world as it exists now, collectively, we have been creating it through years and years. And if we don't pay attention, we go to even, through democratic elections, and everything is not equal, because the people don't have the information, and the people who are living in hunger are in ignorance, on purpose, kept in ignorance, then are forced to have, for example, in my country, the forced migrations within. It is those people that have been migrated. I'm going to be 80 years old this year, and I grew up knowing that school had to be finished at the end of November, because then the families had to go migrating from one place to the other to pick coffee, to pick sugarcane, to pick the cotton, which became the major ways of having resources in our country. But even though they were the ones that were picking all that, that never, was for everybody, because that's the reason that it is talked about having oligarchs in our countries. And the oligarchs could only exist if we had a military to keep us in order because people would rebel, And so we have gone through many, many times of repression and oppression. So it becomes easy to manipulate people that are kept in ignorance and in poverty and impoverishment, in a formal way. So it's very systemic, meaning that it is created every day as we live it. And no matter how we try to correct it, it's never going to be corrected, no matter how much ODA, ODA is official development assistance, like when we cannot really have our own development, we cannot have the rights to self-determination because we have to constantly be about the tortilla of the day, at least once a day. And so today we have an administration of government, and this is very important, the language that we use. Administration of government are those people that through the supposed democratic process get elected. And if people know how to plan it, you will be electing, people will be electing somebody that is not the best for the country because the conditions are such that most people don't even know their history. They are forced to live in ignorance. And so today we have an administration that claims that has all over the world the most approved from all over in the history of the world, the present world. He claims that the administration of government in our country says that they have 97% approval, and that's mobilized all over the world, and that the people love him. And at the same time, we are having a practice of uh, having an orchestrated process of understanding how this democracy works. So it was created a legislature that's going to approve everything and nothing but what comes from the administration. And so since this administration came to the position of decision making, and that many times we say to the decision of power, to the position of power, since in 2019, the process has been to have a legislature that is going to approve anything that the administration of government wants. So it was a process of taking over all the system that makes the life of a nation. So since 2019, most of the gains that through sacrifices and efforts of civil society, because we have worked very hard to have a society that at least responds to the basic needs of people, all those economic, social, political, cultural, environmental have gone back to 70s, everything. And this is not known because it's seen as the people are approving it through the legislature that has been, come to that level because of using the so-called democratic system for them to approve all this. And there are three things going on right now that make sure that everything that has a semblance of civility doesn't exist anymore, and that it cannot exist in the future, because there is something that is called territorial control. That was needed in my country because the gangs have been a big problem, and they have created terrible crimes. But we have to see go back to the root of the situations, understand how those things happen. And I know that the gangs were people from all those migrations, internal migrations, never had an education, never have a future, and people are smart, and then they figure out how to do things. But during the war in the 80s, most of the people that were in the rural areas were bombarded and attacked, and so they had to flee, and many came to your country, and then they had to work very hard to maintain the family in the country and maintain themselves here. So the young kids that were brought or born into your nation during that time became, impoverished people living in the streets and having to create a space for themselves, facing other young people that had created gangs, African descent, impoverished whites, Asians, um, and other Latinos, and so became very, very violent. And then they were deported to our country when they were, you know, like say 18 years old, and they were deported, and they ended up living in the rural areas because that's where their grandparents were, not knowing the language and not knowing the culture and not having any opportunities. So they became very, very violent. And I don't negate that. The problem is that we don't solve that by militarizing the country, but by creating conditions which are supposed to be the reasons that we have been working on the 2015 uh, post-development, new development agendas. But you see, that's why we have to understand what is created for what purpose and how do we process them, because not even in your own country, those post 2015 new development agendas are understood. So that when we see, for example, that are 2/3 of the population in the world that are right now living under poverty or extreme poverty, so that is where we have to start. That is the nature of accompaniment, to be on the side and with the people that are suffering the consequences of the world that we have created. And no matter how innovative we are, it doesn't matter how much innovation we have if we don't go to the root and causes. So, for example, people in your country have all kinds of possibilities, but that is being funded, and your development and development of the peoples in the north, in the global north, is because of the unequal world that we have. And we got to, this is a spiritual thing. That's why, I had the privilege of working closely with Monsignor Romero and all those people that had to be fleeing the violence. So I knew that things had to be done to educate the people of the North, because even the domestic policies that you have in the global North have to do with keeping a standard of living that depends on, for example, getting all that is needed in those countries of the North, so that people have some kind of flexibility. And I know that, not everybody is well off in the United States, but uh, whatever is the privilege that is experienced in the global North uh, has to do with the lack of possibilities in our countries. So we have what now we have is called territorial control, meaning that, they have to get rid of the gangs because they create so much havoc and they are so violent and they violate everything. And so the present administration says we have to defend the rights of the hardworking, honest people. And that is right. But we have to know, why is it that we have the gangs? And the idea that they have is have territorial control. So he's developing an army and a police that, we have to spend a lot of money in. And then they are forced to go at this point under the what is called the regime of exception, that usually happens on an emergency kind of situation, regardless of being environmental or otherwise. But that is supposed to be for 1 or 2 months, maybe 3 months. But now we are more than a year. And in that year of exception regime, the police and the military have gone everywhere, especially in the most impoverished urban and rural communities, and young people, especially, and peasant and indigenous peoples, and those that in any way are taking responsibility to create a kind of society that makes sense even in the small communities. They are the ones that are being captured. So in this time that that exception regime has been, in our country, which is more than a year now, 70,000 people have been captured. There is no way that they can go through any due process. But the mind has changed. The executive has changed and has been approved by the legislature to get rid of this Supreme Court, the Court of Constitutionality, and anything that has to do with the defense of human rights, defenders of the rights of nature. All of them are being put in jail. And then people said in terms of me, how did you escape? I didn't escape. The people that I work with, that I am in accompaniment, said, you must go back there and alert them of what's happening in our country, because this is what is going to be like the model that is going to be used for all those countries that have the people, that the two-thirds world of the population that are living in poverty and extreme poverty. You know, they are going to apply territorial control and capture a lot of people. So right now, 70,000 of them, and that's 70,000 families and communities that are being affected, are suffering a lot. And you know, I have been trying to alert the people in the US, including, because that's the country that is most related to the situations in most of Latin America and the Caribbean, but people are only paying attention maybe to Ukraine, not even understanding why Ukraine is happening. So it's a new world order that is called multipolar world order that is being established, that it has to, you know, it affects every possible aspect, especially the financial and economic aspect. So very major things are going to be created to bring some kind of order, supposedly, a little piece of peace. But we cannot be about a little piece of peace, because we were born in this paradise that the universe created, the Great Spirit created, as that's how we say it in my country, for billions of years, so that we could live in enjoyment, in contentment, you know, without having a lot of the crap that we have now, that now people having to rent places to put all the crap that they get, you know, on credit. And now the debt is being discussed in your country. I know that, for example, the debt for those people that try to end up having big debts, because in order to get an education that is supposed to be the answer, the arm to, you know, to defend your rights, is the world that we have created is completely upside down. And so we need to urgently wake up and say, enough, enough. And here I am telling you this, and I have to be very careful, because I have to think of the people that in my country and outside the country, we are working very hard to stop it. But it's a different world that has been created. There is no, before existed solidarity. We don't want to be in solidarity, because that only helps us, it's about helping us. We don't need help. We need to stop the world as it's going. And that has to be solidariousness, meaning that solidariousness is what Monsignor Romero talked about. Be solid with the people. Feel it. You don't need to go out and even visit us. You have to try to understand why you are living and in which direction you're going as a nation. Where are you going to be at the end of this century? You are all going to have those mega prisons that we have now. You know, this, look at this. In my country, in this 14 months that we have had this state of emergency or exception, as it's also called, and control of territorial control, they are building two mega prisons that are called Center for the Confinement of Terrorists. So there's those 70,000 people, 40,000 of them in each one of those mega prisons and centers for the control of terrorists. So people like you will be hunted in my country too. And in other countries, they are saying, yeah, that's the way that we can have it. And it's called the model of El Salvador, because it's really creative and audacious to be able to create two major, you know, mega prisons. All those people are in there are mostly young people under 30, and they want to keep them there for 40 years at least, in terrible conditions. So we have to figure out the work that needs to be done. So I hope that with this, you understand that the world is being created so that we are all migrating in this planet. We are all in exile. We are all like I am, desterrada. Desterrado is when they take away your territory. And then, in on every unequal thing, anything that is unjust can happen. So the three things are the territorial control, the exception, the rule of exception that is going on, and the prisons. The last thing I want to say is that these prisons also, the people that have any relative in those jails, they have to pay $70 per month per person, and there is no jobs. And so what we are creating is a country where there is going to be slaves so that people can have tourism, sustainable tourism they took, because they can come and enjoy and have, and this is what's coming all over. I am calling on all of us to do our work. What can you do? Educate yourselves. That's why I'm sending those very basic links for you to have. But, we have to also be serious about what democracy is. And democracy is not just to vote, it's having the presence and having the concern for the whole planet and for the whole world. We are called today to become global planetary citizens. And know that I'm not saying global and planetary. It has to be the two of them at the same level. We cannot do one without the other, because we cannot have little pieces of peace. So thank you very much. I know that I didn't have enough time to tell you all that I have to tell you, but we together are the difference, and we must choose to be the difference. And to be the difference, we got to be ourselves different. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Marta. You've given the call and you've given us so much in the information you provide, but also just the inspiration and giving us the to-dos to be solidarious, to act in that way. So we thank you so much for this. I did not see any questions in the chat, aside from Dora Rodriguez, who will speak next and who was wanting to make contact with you. So let us turn, as we digest your words, if there are other questions that come up, we'll have time to come back to Marta. I want to turn to Dora Rodriguez. Are you there, Dora? Because I know that you were indicating that maybe you lost hearing of Marta. So I just want to make sure you're here. Let me quickly tell folks again, Dora Rodriguez is a wonderful partner of ours. She is the director of Salvavisión and co-founder of Casa de la Esperanza in Sasabe, Sonora, just over the border from Sasabe, Arizona. And I give credit to the visual behind me. This is the sidewall of Casa de la Esperanza, where we went, LACC members, last month in April, to visit for the first time. And this is the painting on the side of her wall. So let me have Dora give information about the conditions on the border, and then we'll have Paulina after the ending of Title 42. Dora?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh God, I don't know what happened to my computer, but everything got messed up, so I had to get in and get out. I just want to start saying thank you for the space, and thank you, Marta, for so much history about our countries. And I mean, she's right in all she says, So that continues. But I know I have a few minutes, and I just want to say that everybody who had put in the news, the national news, about all this invasion that it was coming to our borders, at least in the Arizona side, has not happened. It happened that we had a lot of people the night before of ending Title 42. But right after that, it's been almost 2 weeks now. The numbers are back to what we got before. The town of Sausalito, Sonora has not received any deportees at this time. And the town is very quiet. We continue with the problem at the border wall with the harassments of vigilantes. So now we have more vigilantes than actually asylum seekers at the border wall. And it's, it's scary. We have to really be careful what we do. But we also have the repression, as Martha said, a border patrol and not letting us be in the area without being threatening to be arrested because we're delivering a humanitarian aid to our asylum seekers that are presenting. So, in Nogales, Sonora, it is a bottleneck of people lined up for more than 8 days with their children in camps and tents outside in the heat, trying to get the app to work to get that appointment. So it's just terrible what's happening. But Bob Key, who is also a community link member, he is unstoppable. He goes 3 to 4 times now to provide aid with people waiting. So we are sending diapers, baby formula, sunscreen, mosquito repellent, because people is outside in the elements. So that's the crisis. That's the humanitarian crisis that is happening. It's not in the United States, in the borders of the United States. It's in the borders of Mexico. So I just not gonna take too much, but thank you so much for this space. We'll continue together, and only together we can make a change. Thank you. And I sent Martha a text. Hopefully we can connect. But love you all, and I am gratitude for all that you do for our borderlands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dora. And it's good that you are connecting with Marta, since I think you indicated you'll be going to El Salvador. So you can also provide information about what's happening there. But thank you so much. We know that you're on the front lines with Bob Keys. He did send an update since he couldn't be with us. And I think after Paulina, we can report on some of that. So let's turn to Paulina, who is the director of Espacio Migrante in Tijuana, Mexico. Thank you so much, Paulina, for being here today.
Thank you, Rosa and Mary Jean, for inviting me. I'm very happy to see all of you again. So I share the same thoughts as Dora. The weeks before Title 42 ended, a lot of reporters came to Tijuana, and they were expecting to see a crisis. They wanted to film on the day of, but we saw the same crisis that we have seen for the last few years. There has been an ongoing crisis, but it's not something that that was brought by just by the end of Title 42. So even on the days after May 11th, we saw the same. Perhaps we saw a lot more confusion and misinformation, but we didn't see the big surge of more migrants coming that everybody was expecting. So I have a few notes that I gathered from the shelter and from the team, but they shared that the days before Title 42 ended, there was a lot of expectation and a lot of misinformation. However, people had been struggling to access the CBP1 app, and that had been going on since it started in January. So the same struggle, people not being able to make an appointment, families being separated because of lack of appointments. We also started seeing a lot of rumors that people were sharing. Some people heard that the border was going to completely close after May 11th. And other people heard about the credible fear interview, which was going to be very difficult. And if they didn't approve it, they could get sent back home. So this caused a lot of people to feel a lot of despair and to try to either leave to another border city like Ciudad Juarez or try to pay a coyote. We also saw that some of the measures that were supposed to start on May 11th actually started the days before. For example, some people that had a visa in Mexico or residency in Mexico, they were sent back to Tijuana without any explanation, even though the transit ban wasn't officially in place yet. We also saw some families who were able to make an appointment with CBP1. This was the case of a Venezuelan family. They got their appointment on May 8th, and they got sent back to Tijuana without any explanation or documents. So there's been a lot of confusion and irregularities as well. I have a few cases that I wanted to share. For example, one Venezuelan mom and her 8-year-old daughter, before Title 42 ended, they paid a coyote, and the coyote helped them cross through the wall, and they were sent back immediately. Another woman paid a coyote to move from Tijuana to Ciudad Juarez, but once she was going to board the bus driver or the bus company didn't allow her to come into the bus because of her nationality. And there were about 30 Venezuelans who weren't allowed on the bus. So we also see that Mexican authorities, but also even bus companies are collaborating with stopping migrants from moving from one place to the other. In the end, she decided not to insist in going into the bus because she heard the bus driver making strange comments. And there's been also information that sometimes bus drivers turn migrants in to kidnap on the journey. So in the end, she decided to stay in Tijuana. There was another case of a Venezuelan. He's a dad who is with his wife and 2 small children in our shelter. He originally came from Juarez, where he witnessed closely the tragedy of the fire. And when he was in Tijuana, he was walking near the border. This was immediately after May 11th. And just because he was walking near the wall, the Mexican Migration Institute detained him and took him in and started psychologically torturing him, saying they were going to deport him and not let him see his family. Fortunately, our attorney was able to get him out of detention. So we have seen a lot of confusion, a lot of people resorting to coyotes because they don't know what the end of Title 42 means, if it means that the border now is closed or it's harder to get in. With the people in our shelter, we have seen a big psychological impact the days before Title 42 and even now. People who couldn't sleep, who couldn't eat because they were worried about what these changes were going to mean, because they weren't able to get a CBP1 appointment before the date. And it was just very stressful. And also, they didn't have enough money to pay a coyote. They also shared some rumors that even CBP agents would charge $7,000 to cross people without an appointment. We don't know if this is true, but this is something that the people in the shelter were sharing with each other. So some other changes with Title 42 has been now the massive return of people, because now people who try to seek asylum without the app, they are not considered eligible for asylum. Also, the credible fear interviews are in Spanish, but it's not a very good Spanish because some officers don't speak a lot of Spanish. And it's been especially hard for Haitian and Africans because they have the language barrier. So it's been almost impossible for them to defend their cases. We have continued to see returns of people who did. So CBP is returning people who don't have an appointment on CBP 1, but even people who have an appointment. So we've had especially families from Venezuela and Haiti who struggle a lot to make their appointment on CBP 1. Once they came into the US, they were in the US 1 or 2 days, they got their vaccination, they thought they were in process to remain in the US, and they were returned to Tijuana without any explanation. And sometimes this also means separating families. If it's a large family, they might leave a few family members in the US and return other family members without explanation. We have also seen an increase of family separation when big families show up to the border and they come with children that are, for example, grandchildren or nieces and nephews. If they are not with their biological parents, they will get separated. So we're seeing an increase of that family separation. And just an ongoing lack of information. That's not something new, but I think every time there's a new policy, like right now, there's always more misinformation. Coyotes are the ones who take advantage. This was also the case when CBP One app started being in place. So every time there's a shift in policy, we see the same thing, misinformation. And the ones taking most advantage are the coyotes and people taking money from migrants. Also, we have seen a rise of militarization. We read that there were 1,500 soldiers or army elements sent to the border on the US side. And we saw some drills in the beginning of May where at the San Isidro port of entry, people were making line to cross to the US and the line was stopped for a few minutes. Both US Army and also CBP, they wore riot gear and they started doing this drill with sounds and tear gas. But we saw that it was more like a show or a message to asylum seekers that you are not welcome here. And also a message to the people, the community in Tijuana and San Diego, that these are dangerous people. We're preparing for almost like a war. Even my son said, why are they doing that? Why don't they do that in an army base? Why are they doing it in the border? Like it didn't make sense, but it's something that we also saw in 2018 with the caravans. The US Army doing these drills and making it seem or creating the idea that there's a crisis, that there's danger because of all these asylum seekers that were supposedly coming to the border. And we have seen the same thing on the Mexican side, an increase of the National Guard. We see more National Guard, Army, and INAMI, which is Mexican Migration Institute, just patrolling the streets, but especially near the ports of entry, as well as the Tijuana Municipal Police. They make it almost impossible for asylum seekers to come close to the port of entry. They won't allow you near the port of entry because they say it's a federal area, but they don't even allow people to come and ask for information. So there's very few information. Some people who have a CBP One appointment, they don't know exactly what part of the port of entry they're supposed to show up to, or other people who just arrived, they don't have information. And it's really hard for them to get close because you have all the Mexican forces, police, National Guard, just creating this other human wall that doesn't allow them to have this information. So that's in general what we have seen. We also saw the encampment of people who were camping between the two walls. There were about 500 people who started camping the days before Title 42 ended, but they remained there for almost 7 days, I believe. And not only in San Diego, but also all the way to Jacumba. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's on the east, closer to Arizona, and the temperatures are much higher. So in Tijuana, San Diego, these people were camping between the two walls, which is technically US territory, and they were in fact in Border Patrol custody. Border Patrol denies that they were in their custody, but the people camping there received a bracelet on the first day, which told how many days they had been there. And Border Patrol only gave them very little water and maybe a granola bar, but you had small children, you had some people who had allergies, a very bad allergic reaction, a child who had epileptic attack, other people who were injured because they jumped the wall, so no medical attention. And what we saw was also the government trying to leave them there for days without any justification, more to create a sense of crisis, that there's all these people camping. It was very visible. And well, the result of this, even though the people in San Diego, in San Diego were released after a few days, the people in Jacumba remained a few more days, and the result is what the sister who led the reflection in the beginning shared with us: the death of Anna, who's an 8-year-old who shouldn't have died, but it's due to these policies. In the days when these encampments when this encampment was in place, Border Patrol didn't provide enough water, not even blankets. So we saw a lot of mobilization from groups based in San Diego, Catholic Charities, and many other groups who were bringing water station, medicine, and also on the Mexican side, some organizations like Al Otro Lado, Comida Calientita, who is led by a deported woman, Doña Esther, who always brings tamales to all the shelters. And so she was also present. We, the day we wanted to show up, we brought like 100 tortas to share with them. But that's the day when they made them come into the US. So we instead brought it to another shelter. I don't want to take too much time, but I want to share just briefly what our response has been from Espacio Migrante. So in our shelter, we have again the capacity for 40 people. I want to thank very much everyone in Loreto community who donated for us to be able to get new bunk beds, because the bunk beds we had were broken. So this meant that they weren't in use, and this reduced our capacity. And now we have the new bunk beds and new mattresses. So now again, we have 40 people who are there. We know that the need is much bigger, but at least we know that we can provide a safe space for those families who are in Espacio Migrante. We also usually have a food justice program where we give rent support for people who don't live in shelters, and also food stamp cards for people to buy food, medicine. And we had received, or we had been approved a resource from IRC, which is International Rescue Committee, that was supposed to arrive in the beginning of May, but because of their process that is very slow, we still haven't received it. We're supposed to receive it soon, but we're very desperate because we know that sometimes organizations, bigger organizations and donors have their own process, which is more slow, but we know that the crisis is ongoing. So we know that soon we will receive it so we can continue. We were able to have this program for a few months in the beginning of the year, but currently we don't have that resource right now. And another thing that we were happy that we're able to do is information sessions with US attorneys. So this week we had the visit of Rutgers Law School from New Jersey. This is a law school. So it's 2 attorneys and about 10 law students that came. And also CARES in San Francisco, which is a group of attorneys. And what Espacio Migrante did was organize visits to the other shelters. So Monday we were in Casa Arcoiris, and in every session, the attorneys and the law students give information about the changes, because we're trying to fight misinformation or lack of information. So they bring information, and then at the end, they do one-on-one for some cases, but unfortunately it's so many people that not everybody gets to talk to the attorneys. We provide the transportation to the shelter, also very important, the interpreters, because there's a large Haitian community in Tijuana. And we always make sure that we have translation in Creole and also in French in case there's Africans who speak French or English too. So Monday we went to Casa Arcoiris, the LGBTQ shelter in Tijuana. We also went to El Pedregal, which is an encampment where there's about 200 Haitians who live there. In El Pedregal, we also brought food. We can't bring food in everyone because of the few resources, but in the cases where there's greater need, we try to come, not show up empty-handed. We were able to get support from a comedor in Tijuana, and we brought food in El Pedregal. There were 200 Haitians, but it's not really a shelter, it's more an encampment. So it's open, like it's a terreno, like an open space, and they have tents. But right now it's very cold still in Tijuana. So we saw a lot of children who had sandals or very summer clothes, and they were very cold or sick. So that was very hard to witness as well. We on Tuesday we went to Embajadores de Jesus, is the largest shelter in Tijuana. They have 1,700 people. We had been told that there were 1,200 people, so we brought 1,300 tortas. We started making them at 7 a.m. in the morning, and it wasn't enough when we got there because there was more people than we expected. A lot of children as well, and greater misinformation because to get there is a remote area in Tijuana. So it's very hard for organizations to access. It's harder for them to even get information or to even get food because the shelter also doesn't provide, they provide one meal a day, but sometimes it's not enough for people. Yesterday we went to other two shelters, Roca de Salvación, which is also in a very remote area of Tijuana. And what we brought food and we witnessed a lot of hungry children who asked to get twice or two plates because they said they hadn't ate. And it was also very hard to witness. And in the afternoon, we went to Desayunador Salesiano Padre Chava, where they have about 70 men, especially from Cuba and from Haiti as well. And we were very happy that we were able to do this to provide information. Today we have the last session in Espacio Migrante, and we're having people from our shelter, but also inviting people from other shelters or migrants who don't live in shelters. So unfortunately, this is not something that we can do all the time because we depend on attorneys who are able to come to Tijuana. But anytime they come to Tijuana, we try to use the opportunity and provide information and food. So I know that it's time to close. So thank you so much for giving me this space to share. And again, I want to thank all the Loreto community for the support to our work, and especially recently that we were very happy to get our bunk beds for the shelter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paulina. And yeah, we've reached the closing hour, but I was very hard to interrupt you and to stop that flow of information, from being the frontliner there at the border and really bearing witness to what is happening. And we're reading about it, but it's different to hear about these other places that are there, these encampments. I want to just give time for any closing statements. There was one question in the chat, Marta, if you want to take a look, from Grove about the UN Human Rights Framework and how useful it is. Just to give you some closing remarks time. And what I'm going to do is Bob Key did send an update from the border, and I'll put it in the chat. What I just want to highlight is just a little ray of sunshine about all of this that's been happening. And he's saying that that people are watching out for each other, and it's actually created community along the border there in Nogales. So I'll put this in the chat for lack of time, and Martha, give you and Dora, if you want to reflect back on what Paulina said, give you some time. If you can all bear with us for just a couple minutes. Thank you.
This is Marta. I have to run to another responsibility, but you know, I have one thing that I would like to say is that uh, the way that I have been able to survive with, because we never have sought fundings and things like that. We work in sustainable practices at home, and that's how we have done all the work. But you know, the people that have been like working with me in different ways with all my conditions that are very complicated is, you know, very few people that women, most, it's really women that I have known for many, many years. And that it's about 5 of them that never left me alone and keep checking how I'm doing. And I want to thank them. And I don't think that they are in this call, maybe only one of them or two. But thank you very much. And Rosa, this is important. The only thing I want to say is we got to give follow up to this in a very serious, intentional way with a sense of urgency. Because you see, one of the ways that is going to stop this migration is by doing what they are doing in my country, putting the people in jail and making them work for free so that they can have, you know, all kinds of programs for to have a country that has to live from tourism. And this is what is being pushed all over the world. And so we got to really think about it. And I have some suggestions, but it takes more time. And one thing that the UN did in terms of the new development agendas is that they saw that we were starting that process of analysis and figuring out how to correct the past to create a different present so that we have a future of peace. That's what those agendas are supposed to be about. And, you know, we have to work them within and transversally with each other in each country and in the world. But they said 2015, the kids that were 15 years old at that time, by 2030, they are going to be 30 years old, and we haven't prepared them. So there is the resolution 2250 by the Security Council on how to make sure that we work with the youth to prepare them, because this is the world that we are living them. And then we also have the resolution 1325, because, you know, in the world, the majorities are women. And so that gives us some frameworks, and we got to lead this process. Those people that are, you know, governments, they are not government. We, the people, are the government. We are the state, and we got to prepare everybody to be the kind of citizenship that we have to be, you know, global planetary citizens, and it can be done. And I'm willing to work with you in whatever way I can to do this for the time that I have left here on Earth.
Thank you so much, Marta. Thank you so much for that. I am just putting in the chat on this point of the follow-up. If people are interested, to please be in touch. And Dora, maybe you can close us out. And thank you for being here.
Let me just grab something real quick.
All right. So if there are any interested in follow-up, as Martha has called, please indicate in the chat. Okay, Dora, go ahead. Thanks. Can we spotlight her to see what she's holding?
I was just showing something very beautiful. They came from Loreto, and I think it was a gift from Mary Jean and Sally. And it says, "Be light into darkness." So as I am closing with that, and we must continue to be the light into darkness, and then take one day at a time. Because for us in the front line and you guys out there at home, it can be overwhelming. But we just have to take one day at a time. Thank you so much for the space. So let's remember this.
Thank you so much, Dora. That is beautiful. Be light in the darkness. Thank you all for joining us today. It was a great privilege to have our wonderful speakers, Marta, Dora, and Paulina. Thank you for being on the front lines and for sharing with us all of these stories and information. We thank you all for being with us, and we look forward to having you join us in our next Immigration Spotlight, which is scheduled for July, the last Friday of the month. I believe that's the 28th. But we will send information if you want to be on our listserv. Please indicate in the chat if you're not already on our wider listserv. And thank you again for joining us. Peace. Abrazos. Thank you, everyone.
Gracias. Abrazos.
Adiós.
Gracias. Que estén bien.
Gracias.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Gracias, Marta. Gracias, Dora. Gracias, Paulina. Ciao, ciao. We can end recording.